Welcome to EDD 405, Leadership, Creating, Modeling, and Producing Excellence, Module 4. Presentation skills continued, and our themes for this module are
a frozen hand gesture, pause and look intelligent, it's useful,
above pause whisper to get attention,
and then assigning attributes to the group
right,
or to the training.
and 4 indicators of if we're breathing appropriately, and then 2 exercises that follow that. One's called break and breathe, and the other is pause, breathe, and join.
And then we'll go into a little more depth in something we've talked about before, which is credible and approachable voice patterns.
And some of the nonverbal body language that goes with those, right? And that's something really important for your training and even just everyday conversation is what we call economy of movement.
Right.
Making sure that all of you support your message, that there's not so many distractions. Yeah.
Right.
So to begin, frozen hand gesture. Again, these are these small details of nonverbal communication that help support your message.
And there's different uses for a frozen hand gesture. First of all, what a frozen hand gesture is a hand gesture that just kind of stays
Stops.
there, just stops. And it can stay there for a long time, but it's going to hold a concept. So, for example, we know that practice is important. There are many other important things that we really have to take care of. There's the ticket sales, there's anything else. The practice is what we really have to take care of before we can move forward. And then, so it's a frozen hand gesture. What it's going to do is it's going to hold the concept. Okay, there's something we need to take care of before we move on. Now, we've talked about a lot of things so far as our uniform, and what's the color really have to do with it? Okay, if it's brown or school colors are green, nobody will notice, right? So as long as I've got this there, I'm keeping attention for it on that purpose. It is a frozen hand gesture.
We're still on the first topic.
Right, okay. And so anytime you want to stabilize something, it's a useful way to do that.
What we have on the flip chart, you'll see, or on the PowerPoint, is like in traffic, we all know when the crossing guard pulls up their hand or the police officer holds up their hand, this means stop. Even without any verbal language, it's just
right.
Stop. Well, we can use that as presenters as well, where we want to, or teaching people who need to set boundaries. Right. This means stop. It's right. Like kind of one of those universal signals.
Right. So, sure, you want to, that auditory input, okay.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about this?
There's another, yeah, we do that. There's another concept with it is if I'll give you an example. If Marilyn and I are in conversation and if I'm not using a frozen hand gesture, if I'm just talking, now eventually I have to take a breath, and when I do, she's going to want to jump in and start talking. So you're going to try and steal the microphone? Okay. All right. Yeah. I thought you were going to do it.
Oh, all right.
So we're going to be talking about something, and I'm going to mention that she really needs to make sure that her car has gas in it all the time.
What I wanted to talk with you about was something else that is totally relevant to that. I don't care about gas in my car.
So as soon as she stopped breathing, I do this. I've had to wait until she had to breathe. She was going to run out of air. Now, I don't want to have that happen to me, so I'm going to talk about it, and I'm going to keep talking and that, and then when I need to take a breath, I'm going to go, so we want to make sure that you're the one putting gas in your car and that I don't have to, because
pretty tricky, because I was ready to say something.
So what I'm doing is I'm holding a thought, and the thought is still my microphone. I'm still talking. I'm not finished yet. Now she can talk over it if she wants to, and as soon as I need to take a breath, I'm going to have something there.
Otherwise,
so that I can begin. And even if she does that and she jumps in, it's still recognized that it's still my microphone. I'm not through yet. And I'm not doing this because that's inviting. So my hand gesture this way, open. This means it's still my turn. Now, the more definite this is almost too obvious.
That would be too powerful, yeah.
And that would lead to a reaction.
It would break rapport.
This way is much more subtle. Okay, so we've talked many times about putting gas in your car, and we know that it's your responsibility. I
Well,
don't,
I know.
okay, and because I hold this, if I just, you watch some of the news channels and that, where they have guests on and they love controversy, and they're back and forth, talking over each other. It's because they don't know this. If they knew this and then honored it, they'd be better off.
Yeah.
So it's, okay.
I was
see,
going to say
now,
something and he paused. Yeah.
because what it does, it's sending a message, and I can actually influence Marilyn's breathing. We all need air, and if we don't have air, we go into the stress response. So if I just go like this with Marilyn and just go like that, it influences her breathing. I have to go like this. Okay?
Yeah.
All right. So I have, with my palm up, she has permission to breathe, basically. And it's not like she needs my permission, but there's an unconscious,
Energy's
archetypical,
released. Yeah.
you can do this in any country, you can do it in any culture, because this means something. This means something else.
Right.
And so if I really want her to take the conversation over, so we've been talking about who needs to put gas in the car.
Right, we have. And
So
they just passed
palm-
the baton to me.
Palm
Yeah.
up, it says speak, basically.
Yeah.
So what did you
An
think about that?
invitation. Well, it was an invitation for me to have my turn.
And now she stopped breathing. Can you feel it?
I did.
All right, now it's like permission.
Yeah.
All right, so it's really important in not only knowing what a frozen hand gesture is and can do, it's how are we holding it? So if it's holding a concept, that's one thing, and that's useful. The concept is a good thing, so I can look at it, I can use it, I can use this hand to talk about something else, and say, and then, there's another concept. And once this one's taken care of, then we can deal with this, and we can go back and forth. So I have control of two different locations that are stabilized, and I can talk all I want, I can refer over here. This is still important because I'm still holding it, especially if I take it, like if I'm going to tweak something like this and I'm going to hold it there, then I can talk about a mouse over there, I can talk about anything I want. I can come back to it, I can gesture to it, and it's a frozen hand gesture. This is a double frozen hand gesture because I've frozen this one to use this hand. So it's,
And I find this one in my client work is so valuable because when we're wanting connection, we want to keep that rapport, and yet it's a gentle way of allowing you to have stage, so to speak, or the microphone, as Al said, so that we can guide the client, and we're stabilizing these concepts of, okay, here's the challenge that we were working with, here's where we're going. So let's focus on the challenge, but we want to make sure this over here, and I may drop that for a moment while we're kind of identify this.
notice her curl. What did you? I don't know. She just curled her fingers.
Yeah.
That means I'm okay. That, and I'm through with that.
Right.
So
So these things happen as you practice. They start to happen. I hadn't recognized I'd done that
you did it
consciously.
good.
Yeah. So they start to happen automatically once you notice in your client work, particularly because it's like going to a magic show and they're doing close-up magic. They better be really talented because you're right there on top of them.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in a one-on-one session, your gestures are so important to guide your client to where you want them to go and to do these little connecting movements and pauses and it's called presentation skills. Maybe you're not presenting, but you are. You're presenting
We're
ideas.
presenting all the time.
Right.
So I think one of the things I'd like to point out, it's not on your handouts or anything, it's how Marilyn uses her hands. Marilyn is really good at using her hands to paint the picture that she wants you to see. She'll mark things out, she'll flow, she'll fluff, she'll do this, she'll do this. Her gestures are very congruent and they're very expressive. So,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's because of her background in ballet
Maybe.
or something, but her gestures are really good. In fact, we were teaching one time in Mexico City, I think, and someone came up and asked Marilyn if she knew sign language, and apparently Marilyn a couple of times had used a gesture that was the sign for whatever she was talking about. So, if you think about, if you can use you've seen people get up and talk like this, and this is all they do. If they don't know what to do with their hands, do nothing, right? This is useful. This means something, and this doesn't. It's just something they just keep doing. And it's distracting, which we'll We get to talk about later.
Yeah, right, okay. So that's the frozen hand gesture.
Mhm.
And then we have more about that. We just talked about taking the breath. It can create the listener's attention and from one location to another, right? So if you were to use it, doing it, moving from one location to another. So if you were here,
Oh, okay.
so this is moving from one location, so he's talking about something, he wants to hold the
All right.
attention.
All right. All right. Yes, yesterday you played a match, and I mean, we're talking tennis, okay? Yesterday you played a match, and you did a good job, and I noticed that you kept looking at your opponent's eyes and then smiling. Now, I'm not going to be able to move very far. Okay, so that's one thing you can do, and another technique is to not smile, right? So, is that what you were looking for?
Yeah,
The gesture?
where you're gonna, it's often used to move from one location to another, and another way
Oh.
would be to say, okay, so you were
Okay, we're going
looking,
to put that behind us. Kind
put that behind us.
of.
You're gonna do it
Okay,
again?
so, all right. So that was a situation, and we're going to put that behind us, right? And now notice, and once again, it's improv stuff. Okay, we're going to put that behind us. So I'm going to freeze this. I'm going to keep it there until I move,
Remember, this
and
is
then
your
I'm going to curl,
past.
right? So, and there are other ways to do what we're looking for.
Right, okay, so the frozen hand gesture can be used for many, many things.
Mm-hmm.
If you're talking, when we get into group dynamics, we'll talk a little bit more about this. If someone is asking too many questions and so on, and you could say with two hands, so are there any questions? And you're calming this person. Can you see it on camera? Yeah. So that this is inviting these people over here that haven't said anything, and then
And-
keeping this one that's always jumping up to take the microphone.
And you have to be
quiet.
really subtle when you do that. So, are there any
Exactly.
questions? So you can go yes, no. So, are there any questions? Right, so it can be, are there questions, not you, right?
That's a little more sophisticated. but
Or if
we
you
get-
want someone to become more involved in the discussion, say, are there questions? You know,
And
so
you can point right to the person
you can
who's
just
been quiet, yeah.
palm up and say, gesture, it's a 2-point, but you're not singling them out, so it's very natural. So, are there any questions? So
You
it's
notice
boom,
he's
boom.
not looking. If he looks at
Right.
it, it's too obvious, and that puts that person on
And
the
it's like,
spot.
why aren't you involved? Right? It's
But if he's talking to the group, I'd really invite any questions that you might have. He's with the group, and this person's being invited.
well, it's once again, it's kind of the frozen hand gesture again, or the double frozen hand gesture. It's, are there any questions? So I'm inviting here. This one is solid. Okay, so it's, are there any questions? Yes, over here. So it's connecting here. They're okay to ask questions on this side of the room. But this is where I'm looking for the interaction.
Cool. All right, so moving on then, we have pause and look intelligent. Now, this is an important thing to be able to do whenever you're presenting. There are certain ways that we do that in our voice and what we do in the silence. Silence is golden.
Right.
So,
Right.
one of the most distracting behaviors is to have that things where, you know, well, I'll get to it eventually.
Well, I think most of the time people are trying not to lose the microphone. They
Could be. Or
want.
They don't know what to say.
That's
This
possible.
is one of the things I can be quite guilty of. I've had to train myself. Being more auditory, it's like to me, sound is like a song, and all the notes are connected, right? And yet in music, if you think about it, this is one of the things that helped me. There are definitely in the music, when you have a pause, like a crescendo and a stop, or there's a softness and so on, that's what makes the music interesting. So you don't want just one note.
Who was it that said it's the pause between the notes,
The space between the
the
notes.
space between the notes,
Yeah,
right?
the pause there. Right.
See, and that's a good example of a double frozen hand gesture again. It's like, it's the pause between the notes. That's
The important
okay.
part.
Yeah, so,
And I think this becomes a problem for the listener if there's too many of the and-ums and
I cannot listen to them.
even though it may not be true, the perception is that the presenter is not intelligent.
Right.
And
Well, there's two things. One is that it is a perception that the speaker is not intelligent. The other thing is it's distracting. If you're counting the number of times they say or you're not listening to the content.
Sometimes it's a nervousness, like they're, oh, no one's going to talk to me, so I have to talk really, really fast, and I can't remember what I was going to say, so I'll just do a lot. That thing kind of sort of.
Well, as a highly visual person, I run into a challenge when I have too many options. If Marilyn asks me a question, I may see 6 or 7 different possibilities. I have to learn to be quiet the best I can, keep my mouth closed while I think, and then make a decision about which one I want to talk about.
Right, because the second part of this is that the person who breathes through their mouth or stops with their mouth slack is also perceived as not as intelligent. So
Right.
learning to, when you're finished.
Right. It's the culture. It's not that they are not intelligent. There's several people who are very bright, and they sit there, or they're talking, and they'll go in between thoughts. They'll go, I don't know if you can see that well on camera, but it's like, it's almost like, hello, no one's home. It may not be what's going on the inside, and that is a cultural perception. So what we want to do is make sure that we're not sending a message of incompetence or disinterest or anything else. We want to send a message that we have intellect. The best way to do that is close your mouth when you're not talking, and don't try to link sentences and thoughts and words together with ums or uhs.
Yeah.
It's very distracting.
Some people may want to fool with something like some glasses and then take them out and just go, well,
I
don't recommend it. However, if it's a transitionary thing that helps you remember to shut your mouth, it might be useful.
It's not just ums and uhs that do it, or ahs. People will come up with phrases that are common. The term whatnot, or you know. There are different phrases that people will use. They do it maybe so that they're not saying and they're still doing it by using a different phrase. And it can be very annoying to hear the same phrase time and time again. So, as an example, I'm going to introduce a topic, and I'm going to do it least recommended, because
it's good to show the contrast.
it's good to contrast, right? So, what are we going to teach? Anything?
How about strategies?
Strategies. Okay. All right. We're going to talk today about strategies. Now, strategies are, there's a lot of different strategies. There's decisions, decision strategies, and motivation strategies, and I'm annoying myself.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
and I don't know if you, as an audience, it puts you in distress because you're, poor guy, you want to help him out, or you're annoyed because he's wasting your time.
Well, you can be annoyed at the poor guy.
Yeah.
I mean, you really can.
And he's up here presenting, and it looks as if he doesn't know his topic. Maybe he's extra nervous. Maybe he didn't know he was going to be put on the spot to do strategies tonight. However, whatever it is, if you don't know what you're talking about, find something you do. Tell a joke, tell a story, segue it back to the other speaker.
Okay. Here's how you can do it. Here's one way to do it. Okay, tonight we're going to talk about strategies. I'm having the same internal thought process as the one before where I had my mouth open going up. But I say, okay, we're going to talk about strategies. There are many types of strategies that we deal with. One of them is a decision strategy. Another is a motivation strategy. And we even have exit strategies. I don't know which one I'm going to teach because I really didn't study last night.
But he looks more
But I
intelligent
look
than
like
the
I
first
know.
guy. Yeah.
Right? So I can introduce myself, forget my name, and I'll still look intelligent if I keep my mouth closed in between words and I don't say or and or duh.
All those sort of noises.
Right. So I'm happy to be here. My name is Al Sargent. So in a sense, I forgot what my name was, but if I pause, Sargent. All right. I may look like I'm pompous or something, but I'll look like a smart pompous person, right?
Right.
Go ahead.
Okay. No.
Oh, another one that I've seen done that I think is really effective is, and Marilyn and I have adopted it. Marilyn mentioned that she does it a little bit with her client work. And I know I've had to do it at a choice point when we're teaching. And I'll get to a point and I'll come back to the group and say, I'm thinking, just a minute. And then I'll go through my head, but I'll keep my mouth closed. And I won't go,
When his eyes are giving the congruency, he's searching for meaning and information.
And sometimes I'll do something like this. Okay, all right, now I know where we're gonna go. So I can just tell them, I'm thinking. If you have their best interest at heart and you say, I'm taking a moment to think about it, generally people are pretty
It's like, great,
open to it.
take your time, I want to know what you know.
So
Yeah.
I didn't say they're pretty open to it. I said they're pretty open to it.
Mm-hmm.
That sends a completely different message.
Yes.
And we're not saying anything about people who breathe through their mouths. We suggest that you learn to breathe through your nose if you have that challenge. And if you have an athlete, and here's a kinesthetic person, you're going to find someone who's kinesthetic and auditory. It's going to be very difficult for them in interviews. You see, some people are very well coached. Of course, they know what they're going to say as you're learning. They know what the press wants to hear, what they don't want to hear. Yeah, hey, it's all about the team. We know that. But if they're stammering and saying, it's not going to come across very well. And they're going to lose endorsements.
Yes, for sure.
Mm.
Right, good.
None of us want that.
Right. Okay, so that's pause and look intelligent.
Okay.
And there's another slide. All right, how someone breathes. Well, we didn't talk
Mhm.
about that, but it does. So we want you to portray yourself with all of the confidence and intellect that you have in the best way you can so that your people that you're working with will be wanting to follow your lead.
Yeah.
Okay. And we want to be perceived as having intellect. Close your mouth. Right, so I think we covered all that.
Well, I had a thought. We actually used to do some work with academic decathlon teams. Her brother was a coach. And one of the things we would try to teach them is about gestures. And one of the students would, when he'd talk, his hands were constantly moving like this, and it became very distracting. When they give their speeches, that they get graded against it if there's
Extraneous
anything
movement,
right.
yeah.
So I worked with him. I couldn't get him to not do the movement. And what I had to do is say, okay, this is a movement. So I had to give him the movement is not moving. So he was able, it was something he could do rather than something he couldn't do. So by saying, this is a movement, hold it still, he was able to do that, and he did very well. The same thing I think applies with ums and uhs. It's not like that's not necessarily going on in the head. Replace them with silence.
Yes,
So-
good, nice point. So it's
Okay.
not that you're stopping something. You're,
Right. It's not like you can't do
you're
something.
doing silence.
Yeah.
Yes,
Sound of silence. Right.
I like that. That's in that song.
It's a
Yeah.
great song.
And when we were working with the academic decathlon, one of our areas of expertise, of course, was the speech and interview that the students had to do, and they were quite successful. It was amazing.
Won 4 national titles.
Yep. So we're proud of that. So we talked about how it lets people breathe. They can switch from content to process, and the listener feels safer because the speaker looks like they really know what they're doing.
Mhm.
Good. So you'll have your slides to look at. Our next concept is called above, pause, whisper. Right? And so the intention of this is it's a good tool to get a group's attention
Right.
without
You-
yelling and clapping and screaming over and trying to get louder than the group, because that does not work.
It does not work. We'll talk decibel levels, because if we actually get loud, it will annoy me.
Okay.
So we'll talk decibel levels, and what we'll do is like, this is silence and this is yelling, okay? All right. If the group, for any reason, they've been out on break or something has
They're in
cause
great-
them their
great rapport.
great rapport, which is a good thing, and they're not paying attention. It's time to come back. So what will happen is their volume will increase, so they may get to hear. One of the possibilities that I've seen people do is they will clap real loud, like, and
Or
they
they
will
raise their voice to
they
a
will
high
raise
pitch.
like a panic almost,
Mhm.
and or they'll use a bell or something like that. We've actually used a bell, but it's a very nice pitched, soft bell, and it gets the attention without putting the people in a distress. So what happens often is if the group has elevated their volume here, the presenter will try and match that volume and talk to them. And if the presenter gets a little louder, the group gets louder. And then, so you got this pretty soon, nobody's paying attention, and you're not going to break the cycle. So what we do, one of the options is to go what we call above, pause, and whisper. Okay, so if the group is here, you go above the level, and you begin a sentence, then you pause, and then you drop your voice, and they will have to drop theirs to listen. Now, that's ideal, and it generally works, especially after they've experienced it once or twice, because it gets ingrained as a pattern. What will happen is often the group will be discussing, they'll be visiting, not paying attention, and you'll do the above, pause, and whisper, and then if they don't get it, because somebody's going to be watching, you have to stop, and you just have to hold your hand,
So this is, again, frozen hand gesture, 1 point, he's solid.
keep breathing. So I may have started a sentence, and as they get their attention, I'll just start, okay, from that point on, so I'm going to continue the sentence, because I want them to know for the next time that when I'm standing up here, when I come into the presenter spot, it's time to pay attention. That I want them to get that. So I'm managing the behavior. So if the group is loud, I come above for about, could be 5 words, 6 words, and then I'm going to drop, I'm going to pause, drop the tonality, and hopefully in that pause, they learn to be quiet, to pay attention, to turn their focus in the direction that you want it, and then I'm going to drop down and I'm going to speak softly. All right? So if they don't, then I'm just going to stand here. Now, if I go like this to raise my hand and I'm looking at the group, or I'm over here playing with my paper, or whatever I'm doing, or talking to Marilyn, this isn't serious. It has to be taken serious. And the only way to do that is
So the whole body, now not just the hand gesture's frozen, the whole body's frozen, even though he's breathing, so he's comfortable.
but if I look at them, it becomes a message of being punitive, and that's not the intent. The intent is, okay, so then I'll just start so when I get their attention, I'll just start into the conversation. So we've talked earlier before the break about blah, 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 and this time we're going to talk about the benefits, right? So I don't want to look at them when I'm doing this, and if there are other ways to get the attention, this is an effective way, especially if you're going to be involved with a group over more than a couple of days.
Right, and so the reason for taking, like you might even stop in the middle of a word, like 2, 3 words, the third word not being completed, because it creates a dissonance inside the listener's ears unconsciously.
Like the da 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 da.
Right, finish it.
Right. So
So
I'm not going to finish it, are you?
I did. So in the attention, so let's say and it will depend on your group, like if I'm working with children or I'm working with a business group or adults, there'll be different levels of professionalism that will be appropriate for how you're doing this. However, mostly, like say we're working with a group of athletes, we need to get their attention and they are in rapport with each other, they are just chit-chatting, they've been on a break. So I may come closer to the group, I'm going to take my stand, in other words, I am intending to get their attention, and I'll say, so it's really important that, down, get some sense of quiet, that we really get together today because we're going to have a great practice this afternoon.
It's a good example.
So that there's just that, okay, there's something important.
And it may take just a few tries, because most groups, especially if they're well-formed, they want to keep talking. The group will actually start to manage themselves and other people who are not honoring it. It doesn't mean they have to be panicky about it, but they may finish the sentence and then come back.
Yeah, right. And if you're with a group for a long, long time, it's a team or something, you can set up your signals. You may say, okay, when you hear, like I oftentimes in a training, I have a very soft, really pretty bell. It's very delicate. They know that if they ring the bell, if I ring the bell, if they hear the bell, look to where the sound was, and whoever's holding the bell has a message for you. So we set that up because in a longer training, we need to have ecological ways to get people back.
Right. And it's more respectful.
Right, for sure. All right, so we're going to pause and give you a chance to work through these.